Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim McGuire, and I'm the Director of Organizational Development and a coach with Fortune Management. This is week 6 of the 90-day recovery plan. We're going to shift our focus a little bit this week. And as you know, Fortune Management's tagline is extraordinary practice, extraordinary life. And we have been very focused on the practice the last several weeks, working with the doctor on business strategy, applying for the PPP loan, procuring all of our personal protective equipment, so that we can keep everyone safe, and generally helping our Fortune practices have a strategy to open up strong. Some of the practices we work with across the country have already gone back to work, and some practices are going to start seeing patients in the next few weeks. Wherever you are in your practice, this week we're going to focus a little more on the human side of things. This week we're going to focus on the extraordinary life part of Fortune Management's philosophy. Everyone has been through so much the last several weeks. We've had a myriad of different emotions that we've been dealing with. So we'd like to focus this week on what you're going to experience when you go back to work and how you can be your best self. Fortune's true mission is to have everybody be the leader and the person and the healthcare practitioner that they were born to be. So let's focus on that for a little bit. With me today, I have my dear friend and longtime fellow coach, Dennis Marvel. Dennis is an outstanding coach in the Seattle, Washington area, and he has made a huge impact on the lives of the people that he coaches. So welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everybody. Greetings from Seattle, Washington. As Kim mentioned, we are going to take a deep dive into kind of where we are as a community, as individuals in this time of unprecedented uncertainty. What we've been through in the last 6 weeks is truly never occurred in the in the history of mankind. We've all had this really massive common experience, but we're also having individual experiences, and we need to recognize how that's changing and how that's affecting us on a day-to-day basis. This period of uncertainty has been just really so fraught with constant changes and never knowing what tomorrow is going to look like or even what today is going to bring. And for all of us in dentistry, we really kind of like the structure of day-to-day life. We like a little bit of normalcy. We like our schedules to actually work all the way they work. And now pretty much every norm that we thought we had has really been shaken to the core. And the things we used to do a mere 2 months ago, we haven't been doing at all for the last 6 weeks. And so in this time, there has really created a sense of just isolation for all of us, because we've physically, literally been isolated. And now as we get back into our time of work, it's going to be a time for us to really have to shift gears and really focus on who we're being and what we're doing from a moment-to-moment basis. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what's occurred over the last couple of weeks. And your doctors have really created an extraordinary response to something they were never trained to face. And they had to take a deep dive into all of the business operations that need to occur. They had to learn how to navigate the SBA system. All of you had to learn how to navigate unemployment systems, all of which were a nightmare pretty much all the way across the country from everything that I hear. And, we at Fortune have been really engaged with your doctors on a daily and weekly basis to help them create this extraordinary response to protect the integrity of the business so that you can all continue to serve patients and have a great place to come back to work. And so today, what we're going to do is shift our focus a little bit from this idea of being the business consultant, now putting on our executive coach hats, and really step into this concept of what we need to navigate the future. And that is what I'm calling Fortune agility. And agility is a very unique word. It's usually kind of equated to physical agility, but there are multiple levels of agility. We need to be very agile in how we navigate our relationships with our family members in this time. We need to be really agile in how we navigate friendships. And as we all come back to work, we're going to have to navigate this idea of all of us as team members coming back together and all of our patients coming back into place. We're really going to have to be in a place where we're very grounded in who we are, and we have the ability to adjust course as necessary, not just on a grand scale like we've always taught at Fortune, but literally in the moment-to-moment small details in what's going on in our day-to-day life. So Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about what our doctors have been doing in the last couple of weeks and the roles they've been playing?
Absolutely. So yeah, to our team members who maybe haven't been caught up, we really talk to our doctors about these 3 hats that our doctors wear. And it's really being a great leader. We always talk about leadership in Fortune, being a great CEO and making strong decisions for the business, as well as being a clinical director. So the CEO hat is about, as Dennis mentioned, applying for the PPP loan, and the leadership hat has been, of course, like reaching out to our patients, and the clinical director hat has really been about, again, keeping you safe by procuring the correct PPE. Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit about this 4th hat that we're introducing this week?
Absolutely. So our doctors have been in this mode of really being the business leader all this time. And so our 4th mode that we're going to introduce is that of the human being. And that may not seem like a role because that's what we all are. However, when we're kind of in task orientation and action mode, sometimes we can forget the humanity side of this. And so today is going to be all focused on the humanity and really stepping into who we are as human beings. And notice the word is not human doing, it's human being. It's really the most critical role that we have to play in this time. And so it's going to be really important for us to get extremely centered in who we are, get really focused on what are our core values and what are our whys, so that as we step into this idea of re-engaging in the world and re-engaging in our practices, we can adopt all the things that we need to adopt. So over the last couple of weeks, we have been meeting with your doctors. We've really been looking at a unique concept in what occurs in a crisis. And what I've got in front of you is the actual word for crisis in both Japanese and some Chinese dialects. And it's made up of 2 symbols, which are risk and opportunity. And I've always found that really interesting because to me, that does mean that in every crisis, there's obviously a tremendous amount of risk. We've all been really focused on that and afraid of those things. But there's also a really great opportunity that exists in all crises. And sometimes it's hard to find, but if you look for it, it's always there. And each and every week, we have identified what is the biggest crisis that we're facing, and what are our opportunities that we can take advantage of in the midst of that crisis. So that's a little bit about what we're going to do today. So, Kim, I'd like to kind of toss the ball back to you a little bit, and then I want to go into have a little conversation and a dialogue with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So a lot of focus at Fortune Management is on what we call state management. And I know if you've been around for a long time, you've heard us talk about state management. And what we know is that sometimes our emotions can get the best of us, especially during an unusual time like this crisis. And one of the ways to change your state is by asking yourself different questions. The more powerful question you ask yourself, the more powerful answer you're going to get. So let's play a little bit. Let's play around with some questions, Dennis. What questions do you think are important to be asking ourselves or our team members or even our patients right now?
Kim, why don't we start with what questions I would like to ask of you? And as I thought about this, I experienced a real roller coaster ride throughout this crisis. We've gone from, what does all this mean to what's occurring? And there's just been a really wide range of emotions. So let's start with you if we can. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about what your experience has been. So, you play 2 really large roles here at Fortune Practice Management, but you're also a full-time mom, you're a full-time wife, and now all of a sudden you're a full-time teacher on top of that. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what your experiences were from the time this thing started to now. So tell me, what have you been feeling during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just go into the power of vulnerability, as Brené Brown likes to talk about. So I'm happy to be vulnerable with you all. It has been a very interesting up and down time. As you mentioned, yes, I've got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old who weren't in school for a while. They had nothing, and then they started their online school. I have a husband that's now working from home, so we're all in the house together, which obviously is great in a lot of ways. It also brings its own challenges, and I know a lot of you listening have had the same challenges. I will admit there has definitely been some fear, especially when I think it was in April when the stock market took a huge dip. We definitely had a lot of fear about the economy. I have had to really dig deep around coaching my clients and be strong for them as well. I've been thinking about this. Some of my girlfriends who have jobs. So some people in this crisis haven't done any work because they haven't been able to work, and other people, like those of us at Fortune, have been working a lot. And for those people that I know that haven't been working very much, I've actually felt really alone. Like I felt like I really can't relate to other people. So that's been an interesting emotion, because I'm such a connector. I felt like, gosh, nobody feels the way that I feel right now. So there have been a myriad of emotions. Oh, and then guilt, mommy guilt of not being a good enough mom and not having enough activities for my kids, feeling bad that they can't see their friends. I mean, it's been a roller coaster, to say the least.
What do you think they were experiencing, your children?
Kids obviously feed off of their parents and their people around them. I think they have definitely felt their own set of fear and uncertainty and like, this is weird. Why can't we go to school? All human beings, especially kids, need that structure. So they have felt a little discombobulated, if you want to use that word. They have, I think they have felt sadness because they can't see their grandparents. They can't see their friends. They can't go out and play like they used to. It's been a lot.
If I had to describe this whole crisis in one word, I think discombobulated would be a good one. I like that a lot. So what do you think you could have used in this, as you navigated all this and you experienced all these emotions, and think about your kids too? What are some of the things that you could have benefited from? What do you need in a time like this?
I think I needed to know that I wasn't alone. I think I needed to really feel connected with giving back to other people. And that's really part of leadership. That I know that when I was in a down spot where I just wanted to like go back to bed and pull the covers over my head, connecting with other people was really important for me. I also needed to not watch the news. Also feed myself with some positive books or podcasts or audibles. That's what I know that I need. Created structure for myself. Waking up or finding yourself still in your PJs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon was not good. Was not good for me. That was for sure.
So as we start to think about what is our big risk in this week, I think the risk is that there's all these things going on that we've all experienced. And, when we start to kind of reflect back on this, I mean, we've all had so much stuff going on. And I know for those of you that my situation, whether you just live with a significant other, in Kim's situation where you have a husband and kids, or people that live alone, it really doesn't matter. We've all had this big experience that's really been magnified, and that's really affected us a lot. We've got our own emotions that have really added to the chaos of what's going on out there in the world. Our world has obviously become much more complex and difficult. I mean, just the sheer fact of going to the grocery store, which you used to never think twice about, is now kind of a big deal. And, for me personally, I'm putting on a mask and I'm putting on gloves and I decide what time of day to go. And I'm trying to combine everything all into one trip so I can reduce it to a minimum. And so all this stuff that's going around us, there's also all this stuff that's going on within us. And how we deal with this in a way that can not only be productive and helpful, but is really going to take care of our well-being is going to be really critical and important right now. So the risk is we're in the midst of all of our own stuff right now, that we're going to go back to work and we're going to be back around our team members, and they're bringing in all their own stuff. And so then all of a sudden we're going to invite all of our patients into this whole process, and they're going to bring all their stuff. And so what we're going to end up with is this really big pile of stuff. And we need to be really careful on how we navigate all of this, because it's really going to be easy to get hooked into somebody else's stuff at a time when we're already in the midst of all of our own. So we have to be really careful about being yanked around by those things and being pulled off center and being pulled into things we normally wouldn't. So what does it take internally for us in the way we deal with our thoughts and our emotions and our self-stories? Because we all have them. I mean, we've got all this stuff going on right now. And I think all of us, if we think back, have been in a situation where something hooked us. someone says something that catches us totally off guard, or a conversation goes badly, or somebody does something that really creates a really intense emotional state for me in a moment. And sometimes we replay those things over and over and over ahead until they get amplified to the point where they literally can explode in a lot of different ways. So with all of that stuff going on, let's talk about what our biggest opportunity is for this week.
Absolutely. So we know that there's 6 human needs, and those of you who've been around Fortune Management enough know that there's the 6 human needs, and growth and contribution are the last 2. And so, Dennis, talk to us a little bit about this quote that you've coined.
Yeah, so when I started thinking about what is the opportunity for us this week, there's really a tremendous opportunity in a crisis to just absolutely grow and develop in a very big way. And many of us think about the things that happen to us is that's what shapes who we are. And I actually completely disagree with that. I think it's how we respond to what happens to us that shapes who we are. So what if we looked at this whole thing as kind of a do-over day, or maybe it's a do-better day, or maybe it's a care more day? And what if today we decided to really step into the fullness of who we are? And when we think about this idea of growth and development, that's not a passive thing. It's a very important aspect of life. And one that we should all strive for, because it has really major benefits on our lives, and just as importantly, the lives of those people we love. And so personal development is a very important aspect of life, and it's never wasted. So as I started thinking about this, I actually wrote this phrase, and my group of clients have coined these Marvelisms, that growth and contribution are not found in the future. It is the small choices made every day that add up over time that really defines who we are. So it is the choices that we're going to make right now that will determine how happy we are, how fulfilling our lives are, and how much of an impact we leave on those around us.
And what's awesome is that we've got this tool called state management that we've been teaching for years. And we want to kind of put another layer onto that and really talk about something called emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is really, well, it's really managing your state at a higher level. And it's really, being in touch with your own emotions and then being able to relate to other people. So Dennis, talk to us a little bit about this tool, about accessing emotional intelligence and how we can really bring this into our practice, especially in this uncertain time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kim. This idea of emotional intelligence, some of us think that maybe we have it or maybe we don't. The reality is we all have it. Now, it is a skill that can be developed over time, so you can increase it. But the idea of how to access it, we have to recognize that if we're in a highly emotionally charged state, we cannot be in a highly productive and effective state at that same time. So as we step back into the workplace, it's going to be very important for us to access our emotional intelligence easily and all the time. So the first step in that is to really name your emotions. And, sometimes it's really hard to figure out, am I feeling angry, or am I feeling stressed, or is it just anxiety? I mean, what's really going on here? Sometimes frustration and anger can feel very much the same thing. And sometimes frustration can lead to anger and vice versa. So it's really important to name our emotions. And one of the interesting things I've found is that, and Kim, your kids are the perfect age. A lot of times if you stepped in and asked them what they're feeling, they would have a very hard time putting a label on that. And so in this idea of putting a name on it, the reason why it's so challenging is that the part of our brain that experiences emotion is that not actually the part of our brain that understands language. And it actually can't even, communicate language. So putting a label on it can be very difficult. So if you have a hard time with that, that's okay. Just stick with it until you figure out what it is that you're working with. The next step in accessing your emotional intelligence is really to support others in navigating theirs. Now, this may seem like a really odd step to take, but when we have to support other people in navigating their emotions, it actually takes us and de-escalates our current emotions a little bit. So Kim, I'm sure you've had times in the last couple of weeks where your kids have been in a highly emotional state. And when you step into supporting them, it probably reduces whatever you're experiencing at that period of time. So a big part of our goal this week is going to be able to put ourselves in a position that we can support others as they navigate all of these things going on. Then you actually have to step into focusing on what you can control. And, you know, right now there are so many things competing for our focus. We've got all of our social media feeds, and we've got, you know, 24/7 news outlets, and all these press announcements and all these announcements from the governors and, you know, our regulatory bodies in every single state. And there's so many things competing on for our focus, but none of those things are within our control. So we need to step back and really focus on those, because if there's nothing we can do about them, all they do is serve to reduce the level of emotional intelligence we have. So if I can focus on the things that I can control, that puts me in a much stronger position. Next, and I mentioned some of the loud noise that's going on there, we need to get our news and updates from reliable sources. And in this place and in this time, there's been so many rumors and so many stories out there that, you know, it's very hard to really know what's true. And so for me, especially in the first week, I was trying to listen to absolutely everybody to make sure I had an accurate picture. And then what I figured out was that there were so many varying opinions and different points of view out there that it actually become very counterintuitive, and it could serve to freeze us and prevent us from being able to step forward. So if we have a question about what does the state think we should be doing in these first couple of weeks, go to the state. Don't ask your Facebook friends. Don't go out and reach out to some unknown source. Get your information from reliable sources. Now, I do want to add in here that your doctors have been really focused on understanding what's going on and really being in a very proactive state, which is ensuring that as we come back to work, we're doing everything we can in this new environment. And they've had to do the same thing of really figuring out what are my reliable sources of information. So in this case, your doctor is a very reliable source of information. Now, once we've done that, I think it's really impactful to make very creative use of our time. And I found this really kind of interesting because I'm not the most creative guy on the face of the planet. I don't paint, I do write a lot, but I'm not even good with pictures if it weren't for the iPhone. And so, you know, I found time on the weekend, since we've been isolated home, to actually do a lot of the projects that I've been wanting to do over time, and, you know, building a shed and building gates and doing little things like that. And I found at the end of those days that I was actually doing that, I actually felt really good, and I could step back and look at that and go, that was a good job, well done. And so that really helped to keep me in a very emotional, intelligent place. So, you know, if you play an instrument, spend some time doing that. If you've ever wanted to play an instrument, spend some time learning it. If you want to learn how to paint, there's a million YouTube channels out there right now on learning how to paint. There's classes you can sign up for. And so as you have free time, as we're sitting at home, actually try to find some creative outlets that you can use for yourself to really, because it grounds us and it centers us in who we are. And then finally, it's really, really important to know that this too shall pass. It will get better. You know, we have been through a really traumatic time over the last 6 weeks. It's already starting to improve in a lot of ways. You know, us here in Seattle, we kind of had to deal with this thing right out of the gate before anybody knew what it was or what was going on. And fortunately, we reacted very, very fast. But now we're kind of starting to come out of the other side of it, as all of you are as well. And so you've got to know that even though we're going to face a lot of challenges in the coming months, it's going to be very important to remember that it will get better, that things will improve. The nature of humanity and nature of the world is to constantly be evolving. So if we take control of that and we come from an emotionally intelligent place, our evolution will be taking us more into who we really want to become. Kim, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I love that. No, I think that you've really looked at all of these different areas and how we can be more emotionally intelligent. And this is just going to help you in every aspect of your life. And that creativity thing, I know when you do something that feels creative or you feel like you've accomplished something, it's awesome. So as you talked about, personal development is something that happens all the time, that continues to happen all the time. And one of the great teachers that I know, Dennis, you and I have studied for years, because you and I have been doing personal development for so long, is a woman by the name of Byron Katie. And she has a program called The Work. And tell us a little bit about what your perspective is on Byron Katie and some of her tools that she teaches.
Yeah, so I'd like to actually start with a quote that Byron wrote at one point in time. It said that I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered. But when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer. And that is true for every human being. Freedom is as simple as that. And so, when I was thinking about how this virus is going to affect us, it doesn't really change what we need to do. The economy is going to affect us, but that also doesn't really need to change what we're going to do. And the interesting thing is that all these things are real and they are impactful, but it's the way we think about them that really determine how we respond and how we occur. And so it's very, very important for us to examine our thoughts, because the way they affect us can be huge when you put it on top of all this other stuff that's going on. So Byron had a very simple process that you can go through personally to help you get control of your thoughts. So I'd like to share just really 4 simple questions and 1 simple step that you can take as you find yourself struggling with your own thoughts. So question number 1, and let's just say that somebody comes into the office, one of my team members does something and it upsets me, and I immediately go to one of those "she is a" or "he is a blank" statements, right? That's a thought that is making a judgment on what just occurred. And so I immediately want to ask myself, is that thought true? Because if I really know who that person is, they may have done something that upset me. That doesn't change the fact, but that doesn't mean all those other thoughts that ran through my head. And a lot of times our thoughts can be very separate from who we really are, and they can actually diminish who we really are. So first question is that thought true? Once you've asked that question, now you need to ask, can I absolutely know that it's true? Is everything that we think really true? And I like to look at the world from a lot of different perspectives. And a lot of times I've found that my first thought about something actually wasn't even close to being accurate. So asking myself, can I absolutely know that it's true, puts the question of, is my thought even, is it even viable? Or could there be other possibilities out there? Then we need to ask ourselves, how do I react, or what happens when I believe that thought? So if one of my coworkers or one of my patients or one of my kids or my husband or my wife did something to me, and I recognize that I react in a way that is less than the way I would prefer to act, then I can now trace that back to the thought that was occurring in my head at that particular period of time. So examining what happens or how do I react when I believe that thought is really important. Then the last question is, who would I be? Notice not what would I do, but who would I be without that thought? If I was to totally let that thought go, would it change who I actually am? And then once you've got the answer to that, and by the way, the question is almost always, yes, it would, or, I'm going to be a much better person without this. I need to turn that thought around. So as an example, if I said that, there was something with this team member and they were a such and such, then by turning that thought around, I can say, no, I actually really know who that person is. They really care about me. They're just in the middle of their own stuff. And what I really know about them is that she is an incredible human being that would do anything in the world to support me. Now, all of a sudden, I'm really back in touch with my emotional intelligence. Does that make sense, Kim?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I always say is that truth is truth is truth. So whether you've been studying the reality check and thinking about what meanings am I making, what meanings am I attaching to certain situations, or if you've been studying Brené Brown, she talks about the story that I'm telling myself. It's the same kind of thing, these thoughts, these stories, these meanings. And really, I love the question number 2, can I absolutely know this is true? One of my coaches, what she does is she still say to me, would you bet $1 million on it? And it's like, ooh, but what a different question. Would I bet $1 million if this is true? And it's like, well, you don't always know what's going on for the other person. So I love this work. It's very, very powerful.
Excellent. And so going through this process, once you've done the turnaround, you want to find 2 or 3 examples of what could be possible. Then you actually want to find some genuine examples of how that is true in your life, because that forces the thought to completely disappear in your head. The way our brain works is by, basically hardwiring paths. So once we found the turnaround and 3 things that support that turnaround, we now have a totally new path in our brain, and that will diminish the times that thought reoccurs to us in the future. So let's talk about what happens when we kind of all go back to work. And we already talked earlier that, we've got this situation where we're bringing all of our own stuff back to the practice, and all these other people are bringing their stuff back to the practice. And one of the problems with strong emotions is that they're really controlled by a different part of our brain than controls our higher level thinking. And it's this cortex of our mammalian brain is really responsible for the core of emotions. And that's things like the fight or flight response and things like that. And the interesting thing about the way we process information is it actually comes through that part of our brain first before it goes to the upper level thinking parts of our brain. So that's why we very often tend to respond with emotion, because that's where emotions reside as well, rather than with really rational thought and well thought out processes. So when we experience a strong emotion like anger or sadness or fear, the mammalian brain becomes active and takes over the whole human brain. And then it supersedes our higher order of functions like empathy and advanced thinking and stuff like that, and totally knocks us off track. So during these powerful emotions, our amygdala actually becomes overstimulated, and that primitive part of our brain really takes over and totally destroys what level of emotional intelligence we ever have. Daniel Goldman, who wrote a book about emotional intelligence back several years ago, actually called this the amygdala hijacking. And this explains why someone in a really strong emotional state might respond really poorly to directions or commands or even in basic interaction. As an example, if one of your kids is upset and they're yelling at one of your other kids and you yell at them to stop yelling, it actually only escalates the problem, right? So what we have to do is be able to step back and interact with somebody in a very different way to overcome this emotional hijacking. And there's really 3 key steps that we need to take. They are emotional mirroring, they are validation, and then confirmation. And we're actually going to give you some very simple tools of how you can take these 3 steps to overcome any emotional hijacking that you may encounter, whether it be with a coworker, a family member, or a patient coming back into the practice.
Awesome. So what are some of these practical tools, Dennis, that our team members can take on right now?
So the first of these tools is one that we all know and love, and that is this process of state management. And for those of you who've been around Fortune management at any length of time, you've probably seen all of our slides on state management and the steps we actually need to take to manage our state. But it's a really good time to recognize that we can either be in a really productive state or we could be in a not so productive state. We can't be in both places at the same time. So the first thing I have to recognize is I'm in an emotional state, which is not necessarily the most effective state I could be in. Then we use our tools of state management, which very simply are examining our beliefs. And I actually say that one first, but it usually comes last. The first one I usually try to do is actually changing my physiology. Or if somebody else is in an amygdala hijack, say a patient as an example, if we can get them to change their physiology a little bit, it will actually change their state. I saw something really brilliant that a hygienist did one time, and she actually dropped a mirror, and yes, it was Cheryl, behind the patient's back and asked the patient to get up so she could get it. And the patient totally changed the state. They were really upset, they were high anxiety, and they were super agitated. The patient got up, she got the mirror, the patient sat back down, and it was all calm. So just a small physical interaction can really change our state in a very, very rapid manner. Next, we want to examine what is our transformational vocabulary, TV. And we've all got this tape running in our head and this ongoing monologue that never seems to end. And a lot of times that state is, or that language is not as effective as it could be. So we need to adopt much more effective language. And then we can move into another Fortune technology that we've all been taught is, what is my sensory acuity? Am I really dialed into everything that's going on right now? And we not only need to be very, very aware of what's happening in our own selves, but we need to be very aware of what's happening in others. And to do that, we not only have to listen to the words that they're saying, we have to observe what they're doing. We have to look at their physiology. We have to listen to their tone and their pace of speech. As people start to escalate in agitation, sometimes they're sitting in a dental chair. It can be as simple as watching their hands grip to the handrails. And so really being aware of all the things that are going on in a particular environment is of critical importance. Then next, we really have to deploy empathy. And empathy sometimes can be really challenging. And I personally, I have a really hard time thinking that, Kim, you could have an experience and I could have the exact same experience, that it would be exactly the same for both of us. So I don't think I can actually step into your shoes, as a lot of people say. I can, however, recognize that Kim's had an event in her life. I had that same event in my life. It affected me this way. I have no idea how it's affected Kim, but gosh, I can be so empathetic with how it is for her. And that's really what empathy is recognizing that everybody's experience and everybody's perspective is valid, and I can do my best to try to understand it and to engage with it. This next one is really probably the most important, is we have to have an immense amount of respect for people as a whole. And, I have this belief that we were all really created as incredible individuals, that we're all very resourceful, that we all have a very unique and beautiful gift to bring to the world. And even if somebody's behaving in a way that I may not approve of, or I may not like, or it may make me upset, I have to respect who they are and who they're being, because as a human being, everybody deserves that level of respect. Then we can deploy our compassion. Now, compassion is something that we, and all of you, especially as caregivers, you've decided to step into a role of caring for other people. So you naturally have a very high level of compassion. But in this particular instance, you really want to dial that up and make sure you're coming from a completely compassionate state. And then the final tool of the technique is really to get into partnership. And what I mean by partnership is I have to align with this person and recognize that we are both in an emotional state. We are both human beings of value. We are both in an intense or stressful situation. I have a lot of respect for who this human being is. I've got my compassion. Now I need to align with this person and join them on this path to help them get through this amygdala hijacking. And that's the most critical part, is recognizing that when somebody else is upset, and, Kim, it's probably really easy to think about, when something happens to one of your kids and they really get upset about something, instead of just telling them they're wrong, you probably actually deploy all of these steps because you're in partnership with them and helping them get through daily life. And that's where this partnership role is easiest to understand. Does that make sense, Kim?
Absolutely. And what I love, Dennis, about this list of all these tools and that we've been teaching at Fortune for years and years is that right now is the most critical to use this. For the processes that we know that have already gone back, they're dealing with new protocols. They're dealing with bringing the patients in a physically different way. They're dealing with face shields and different PPE. And we want to make sure that these tools are really coming to the forefront, because you're going to have a harder time really communicating with people with all this PPE on. So your sensory acuity is even more important, and your state management and empathy is even more important. So at this time, thank you for bringing these things up, because I think that this is what our teams want to be focused on, this human element. We want to not be robotic because we've got all these new ways of doing things. We want to go back to that personal touch that all of our Fortune practices are so good at. So this is awesome.
Yeah, and many of us have spent years and years and years becoming less medical and more dental and more relational and really engaged with our patients and things like that. And now all of a sudden we've been forced into a situation where on the appearance surface, a lot of those things have gone away. And because we're coming in all this PPE and all this stuff. So we really have to get back in touch with the human side of things and engaging with people. And so, Kim, you mentioned this idea of communication. And so I actually want to give you some communication techniques that you can use that will really create both emotional mirroring, validation, and confirmation. And so those things are really easy to do. And these are some very simple phrases that I'm going to give you. Then I kind of want to give you some on how we deal with some specific situations in this. Now, what I want everybody to recognize is that I believe that communication is the relationship. And what I mean by that is, like, if I'm interacting with Mary, my wife, and we're communicating, communication is all of the interaction that occurs between the two of us. It's holding hands. It's the way we talk to one another. It's the words that we use and all of those things. And so our communication really is and defines what our relationship is. So if we're going to get back into relationship with patients, we need to have really effective communication that not only does this emotional mirroring and validation and confirmation, but really helps us get back in touch with our humanity and their humanity. So when we see somebody that's upset by something, and maybe it's somebody that's afraid of all these new protocols and they're worried about how safe they are and stuff like that, I could just say, are you feeling concerned? Or you seem like you're concerned. And as soon as they go, yes, I really am. Okay, now we're dealing with what's really going on, not the behavior that's created by what's really going on. So when something like that occurs, and you know, we're going to hear all kinds of crazy stuff, by the way. When, you know, patients are coming in with all the additional stuff than they normally have, they got all this other stuff piled on their usual stuff, and all these fears going on, we're going to hear some really crazy things going on out there. And one of the wildest ones I heard in this last week was a patient that walked in and asked one of the front desk team members that, you know, what's your protocol for making sure the carpets are clean and sterile? And the front desk person said, I didn't even know how to respond to that. And, you know, instead of trying to explain what that protocol is, she could have very easily just said, are you feeling really concerned? Are you worried about this thing? And then I said, I bet when you're feeling that, that can be really intimidating or really fearful or create anxiety for you. And so that's this idea. First off, we're connecting with what they are. We're emotionally mirroring with them. Then we're validating their opinion or their feeling by saying, I bet you feel really, you know, upset when you're concerned like that. Then we can kind of turn that around and validate it and say that, you know, if you understood this really, really well, I bet it would alleviate a lot of that concern. And then you can go into what is the process of explaining or answering the real questions that they have, but you've got to get to the emotion first. And it's really important sometimes to confirm with people by aligning and say, you know, I completely understand. I've recently or often felt really concerned about this situation too. And we can all say that. You know, I've had high anxiety, I've had some stress, I've had some fears in this thing. So I don't think there's many emotions that are different for me than they are for Kim or for any of you listening to this message. So it really is totally authentic to say, I completely understand. I felt high anxiety so many times in the last couple of weeks. And so in this process, you're really mirroring what their emotion is, you're validating, and you're confirming that it's okay. And that's the important thing. Now, in closing, I want to talk about this whole PPE issue a lot. And Kim mentioned this idea of wearing face shields. And by the way, if you've never worn a face shield before, I highly recommend you wear it for several hours before you ever sit down with a patient. They're very strange. They create some visual distortion, even though today's glasses and plexiglass and all that stuff is so much better than it used to be. It's a little bit weird. You need to get used to those things before you actually sit down with a patient. But excuse me, if a patient has concerns about anything in the dental practices concerning this virus, it's very easy to just say, you know what, our standard protocols and procedures have always been developed to deal with a situation like this. Before this happened, we actually came in every single day assuming that one of us had some kind of virus or some of our patients had some kind of a virus. So all of our standard protocols and procedures were designed to deal with that. And because of the severity of this thing, we are now doing blank, 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 and blank. And that is a way to make, you know, people really feel at ease. But you have to go back to this step is knowing all that, does that make you feel better? And as soon as they say yes, you've totally de-escalated whatever emotion they're feeling. So I want you to recognize that the communication that we use in this process of coming from an emotionally intelligent place, of really engaging in what are our thoughts and are these things true and are they the most effective thoughts that we have, using our tools to manage our own state and our own interaction with people, then the communication is what becomes the expression of all those things we talked about today. Does that all make sense, Kim?
Absolutely. I love it. I've heard some of my practices have been practicing with their face shields and maybe even bumping into one another. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and just get comfortable in your new skin so that you can use all of these skills that we've talked about today. So we've ended all of our webinars during this process with this last slide about the law of attraction. And some of you may have heard that statement, and some of you, it might be a new concept. Basically what it is whatever you give your focus and attention to, either wanted or unwanted, so either positive or negatively, more of that's going to grow. So if you're focused on fear and lack, you're going to be in a scarcity mindset, and that's not going to probably serve you. If you're focusing on abundance and giving back, then you'll be more in a growth mindset, and more of that will come towards you. So be thinking about what you're focusing on, what you're focusing your attention on, and what you really want, and you're going to get more of that. Dennis, do you have anything to add to that with the law of attraction?
No, Kim, but I know that in my life, I absolutely always get what I put my focus on. And, you know, if you focus on getting more abundance and more beauty and more strong relationships in this time, I know that that will come true. So I've set an intention as we come back out of this isolation phase into a little bit more of a normal engagement phase to generate enduring connections with everybody that I come in contact to. And that's a thing that I consciously focus on every single day before I could get up and engage with people in webinars or getting on the phone or even going out into the world as we get ready to do all that again. So thank you all very much for your time today. And Kim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Absolutely. And I love your intention. Yeah, my intention for this whole year, my theme has been to really be more present with myself and my family and my friends and my clients and all the people that we work with. And this crisis has really given me a chance to really focus on that and hone that skill even more. So thank you so much. So Dennis, thank you for spending some time with me this morning. It's been wonderful learning from you, and thank you to all the clients. It is an honor for us to work with you and to watch you grow and navigate through this time. And we wish you all the best as you return to doing what you do best and serving your patients. Thank you so much.